and there it is. As of now, the webinar has been recorded. It always takes a while, which means a couple of hours, to convert the material, make it available for you. So that will probably happen tomorrow. And I'm going to notify you exactly where you can find the webinars from now on. What we've been setting up is a YouTube channel where we are going to post the webinars as we create them, and probably also more materials in the future. But I will for sure inform you via the closed Facebook groups and with a link on NetSchool where you can find the information. And the last point related to the organization of the webinars is evaluation link, which you will receive immediately right after we finish the webinar. You will be redirected to a very, very short questionnaire in which actually we ask you to evaluate your experience with the webinar. And there's one important open question there. I would urge you to answer it, and that one refers to possible additional topics that you would like to know more about. It will be really nice, and we will appreciate if you share your thoughts with us, because you will give us input for future webinars which we did not plan yet, and we can offer you even more within this semester. So once again, I urge you to use that opportunity to evaluate your experience and tell us if there are more topics that you would like to know more about in a webinar, and not obviously in the seminars if you're following the course. What I didn't mention is that, so far is that this is actually the very first webinar, which I'm giving, which is a series of 5. So it is a very special one. I feel also a little bit nervous, so I'm sharing this with you with a request to bear with me a little bit. I really hope that I'll get better in the webinars. It's very different to talk to a screen knowing that you're there than if you will be here in a lecture hall. But I will learn along the way, and hopefully by the time they will be only becoming better and improving. So as I mentioned, this is the first out of 5 webinars. Many of you already, I saw, registered for the other 4 webinars. If you haven't done so, then feel free to register. The quickest way to register is to use your NHTV email account, because automatically you will be approved as a participant. And as I indeed mentioned, the other 4 are more related to the content of writing your thesis, more about the one following next week at the end of this session. So what am I planning to cover? Well, as the title actually reveals already the topics of interest. So organize your reading and writing. The webinar is really oriented to the organization of a thesis project in general. And as there will be lots of reading and writing involved, we thought that this will be a smart point to, or good topics to talk about. But I'm saying already now that maybe this one is not going to add extremely new insights to you. You already have a study career with the NHTV and probably also, obviously, previous education as well. So you have learned yourself the best how you learn. But I do hope that I will be able to bundle some very handy tools that you can use, some already at your disposal, some maybe new ones, and remind you of how important they are and basically applicable to your entire research project. Even though maybe somewhere halfway the webinar it feels that I'm talking only about the literature review, I don't think it is the case eventually. I think organizing your reading and writing applies for all parts of your thesis and not necessarily your literature review. So first we're going to start with the issue of planning. My urgent advice to start planning your semester, if you haven't done so, by using the idea of a priority matrix as well. Second, I'm going to use the so-called Big Six model, which is a model of collecting and processing information. I will go through the steps of the model and give you examples by using additional links and templates which I have available. And some of you are even already at your disposal in previous courses within the NHTV. And part of those 6 steps is also, for instance, the element of search, smart search of sources and writing smart. And lastly, I'll just briefly highlight what is the topic of the next webinar. There's some people still joining, I believe, so let me see what's going on there. Okay, well, I don't see anything in particular going on with the participants, so I think we can just continue. My audible reminder that it's time for 5 minutes break, which we're not going to take, obviously. All right, let's see if I can get rid of this one. Voila. Last but not least, the sources I'm going to use for this webinar are 2 books. The first one is called How to Do Research. That's one of the recommended books which I think I've been promoting on the closed Facebook groups for a while, at least once or twice. I have been pasting a link to it. It's actually a booklet, I think, and it's for me, it's like a checklist on how to do research. And the good thing about this book is that it's written especially for students within higher education in the Netherlands. So it has some very, very handy additional links and information which are applicable, for instance, for studying here within the Netherlands. So it's definitely still a recommended one. So that's one of my sources for the session of today. And the second one, which I also used, is called Essential Study and Employment Skills for Business and Management Students. And it's published by Oxford, and Kevin Gallagher is the author. Many of those skills are skills that you've been practicing in the first couple of years here within our education in programs like NDP or trainings that you had by your personal coaches. But it still has some very good ideas and suggestions, and I'm going to share some of those with you today. Besides that, I'm also using our library intensively with specific links to the library guides available for you, and also NetSchool. And last but not least, your courses in English has been also a source of information for me. Enough about the introduction and the organization of the webinar. So let's move into the next and the first topic that I had in mind. See, it works. Well, let's start with the inevitable, which is planning. Well, many of you will, looking at the picture that I have on the screen, many of you, based on experience, will probably agree with me that reality is very different than your plan, right? So sometimes tasks just take longer than expected. It can even happen that companies suddenly withdraw their confirmation to participate in your thesis. Good or bad happens in your family, and that which requires your attention. So reality is, we all know for sure, different than your plan. Still, I would like to plead that you look ahead, because I believe that it really increases the probability that you're going to finish your thesis in a reasonable time, and ideally reasonable time means 1 semester. Many of you have a placement next to writing your thesis, or maybe a part-time job, and that really complicates the time that you have available to write your thesis. And I was thinking that even if you do not have such obligations, you might be at risk at overestimating the time that you have, and the deadlines will approach much sooner than you think. So one very handy tool, which is known to many of you to visualize your activities, are the activity charts. And one of the most used and famous tools is a Gantt chart. So I suggested right after this webinar, if you haven't done so, that you already start creating your Gantt chart. And thinking about your Gantt chart, there are 3 points of attention which can help you to create one. First of all is to start with your deadlines, then to identify the essential tasks which are a part of writing your bachelor thesis. And for the students who are in the bachelor thesis course, if you think about the idea behind the very, very first assignment of the concept map, that was actually the idea behind it, for you to be able to identify what are the different tasks and related activities through the whole process of writing your thesis. And last but not least, in order to be able to draw the Gantt chart, you will also have to estimate the time that you need per task plus the order of executing the tasks, where, for instance, you can already consider two orders possible. One is the sequential one, meaning that one task needs to be performed first before you move to the other one, and the other order is obviously the opposite one, the parallel one, where you can deal with two tasks simultaneously. For example, imagine that you will be analyzing quantitative data. You can only start analyzing the quantitative data after you collected all respondents. In contrary to being engaged in collecting qualitative data, for instance, from interviews or focus groups, you don't have to wait for all the interviews to start transcribing them and even coding them. So those will be 2 or even 3 separate tasks in your planning, which you can run parallel next to each other. Going back to the beginning of very important information in order to draw the Gantt chart for yourself, that will be starting with a deadline. There have been always rumors around where to find the deadlines and what are the deadlines. So I thought, let me take at least 2 minutes of our time in this very first webinar. Sounds maybe a bit childish, but I want to show you where are the deadlines, because there's only one source of information which all of us are following. And all of us, I mean you, me, and all other graduation coaches, and that's NetSchool. So I'm going to get out of my PowerPoint now and open NetSchool. There it is. And specifically in NetSchool, I mean the folder called Info Sources, this one. I hope your dashboard looks similar to mine. Oh my goodness. So if you click on the Info Sources, then there will be the Academy of Information. And to be perfectly honest, I always have to look between those 2 folders. Where exactly is the planning? Is it within the Academy Information or Educational Program? But I believe it is under Educational Program. There it is. Where we find, for instance, the year planning, the general one, but also the bachelor thesis defense plannings. And as you see, we have 2 files available in here. One is the bachelor thesis, as we know it, 2.0. Those are all the students who started officially graduating, so they were officially admitted in their graduation year before September 2016. So this does not apply for you. You should follow the so-called 3.0 planning. So this is the only file where you can find your deadlines. And obviously semester 7 has passed already, so you will have to look at semester 8 and see that there are indeed 2 opportunities for your final thesis. There they are, including the registration in Osiris, hand in the reports online, and so on and so forth. Also, not to forget the deadline for the intermediate bachelor thesis, which is an option open to all the students in their graduation year, not necessarily the students who are following the bachelor thesis course. This has not been announced already, but I know that some of you are not following the course and only the webinars. So be aware that also the intermediate bachelor thesis is a possibility for you to use. So there are the deadlines and also exactly where you can hand them in. So the moment you will start with your Gantt chart, I will say this is the first spot to look at. And this is the only, as I said, official source of information of the deadlines related to it. I'm not going to need NetSchool anymore, but I will keep it open for now. So let's go back to my PowerPoint. So obviously, afterwards, you can simply schedule tasks in a paper diary, in a Google or in an Outlook calendar, or in a computerized Gantt chart. And many of you already have done so. I saw it on Facebook. If you Google Gantt chart, a simple Google search will lead you to lots of opportunities and possibilities as add-ons to Microsoft Office software, for instance. In particular, I like this one. I want to show it to you. The information about Gantt chart on mindtools.com. Mindtools.com has been a source of information and handy management tools already from EO1. I believe they incorporated in some of the NDP trainings, for instance. But this source offers quite handy step-by-step information of what is the tool, where can you use it, why can you, and how can you use it. And if you scroll, some examples obviously, and if you scroll down to the page, you will see even a template that you can download. So I will say this might be a handy starting point for some of you. Let's close this one so it doesn't interfere anymore with what I still have open. One of the other issues that I mentioned is estimating how long a task will take you. Well, you might ask yourself, but how do I know how long I need to search for literature, and how do I know how long I need to collect my data? Well, to be perfectly honest, probably you don't know everything. So as you're experiencing some of these steps in a research project for the very first time, so I would say reflect first on what you experienced so far. Think of, for instance, year 3 paper when you had to transcribe interviews, how cumbersome it is to transcribe those interviews. My experience is that an interview of an hour, so an audio, it can be also a focus group interview, not a one-to-one interview, but an audio of hour and a half will take me approximately 4 hours to transcribe it. Let's say, for instance, that you're interested in testing relationships. Imagine the example of the relationship between waiting time and the level of satisfaction. That will probably entail some statistical testing. So you could think of how confident am I in conducting those statistical tests, and do I not need some additional time to get myself acquainted with working with SPSS, the statistical package within the social sciences, or conducting those analyses in Excel, for instance. That will definitely take you some extra time. But whatever you do, I think it is important to plan what I call the 10% of unforeseen time, which will definitely you will need. Otherwise, you will jeopardize your deadlines. And another a good one to remember is the 80-20 principle. And I've been just drawing those simple 2 lines. If we take, for instance, the intermediate bachelor thesis handing moment and the final bachelor thesis handing moment, I think that you can say that 2/3 of your time, so the 80% of the time that you need for your research thesis, you will need to design your project. This will be the time when you think of the relevance of your project, the context analysis, the questions that you ask or the goals that you set, the literature that you will need to frame your project, the methodology that you're going to work out specifically, step by step, thinking of the general research design, your data collection techniques, your data analysis techniques. So, and all these parts that I'm mentioning right now are actually obligatory parts of the IBT, or the intermediate bachelor thesis. And I think that will take you a lot of time, because you can see it as the plan of attack. And the moment you have that plan of attack ready, especially the methodology part, the time that you need to execute your project, so collect your data, analyze it, write it all up in one coherent project, is considerably shorter than the time that you need to plan it. So, and so far that always has been a very successful strategy for a lot of students. So know when you plan that you would need a little bit more time now. It is frustrating from time to time. Well, I know the feeling, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, especially when you design a project. Sometimes you get into moments when you're stuck, but the moment you finish the methodology and you have your plan of attack ready, then the time that you need afterwards will be considerably less. let's see. All of this, what I mentioned, is related to planning the semester in general, so up until and including handing in your final thesis. But I think it's also a good thing to take a minute and think of how you can plan the day, especially if you have dedicated study days to work on your thesis. And there is a productivity PDF which is worth sharing with you. There it is. Definitely one of my favorites. By the way, I'm going to make everything available for you in terms of files which I'm using right now. But there are some very good tips in here to be productive and organize your day. One of my favorites, for instance, are do a bad first draft. You cannot edit a blank page. I think I've been using this really a lot. Or do easiest things first and really prioritize one item per day. So at one side, the Gantt chart will help you to plan the whole semester. At the other side, you really need to consider as well what can you perform, which task can you perform on a specific day that you have dedicated to your thesis. And the last model related to it, before we move into searching and organizing, it's the Eisenhower box, and I'm sure you know it. You've probably seen it during strategic management in a slightly different version. But this one is very helpful to decide what to do in a day by daily basis by thinking of the idea of important versus urgent tasks. So I thought it's worth reminding you of the possibility to use it and know which one you really need to discard and which one that you can focus on, and hopefully that will help you to be efficient and effective when you study. How are we doing with the time? I'm just going to quickly have a look if we have some questions which really need to an answer now, and I'll pause sharing with you for a minute. Let me quickly have a look. I don't see. Let's see. I'm going to have a look first at Gerlin's question. Collecting your data will be done after handing in the IBT. Yes, exactly. So the intermediate bachelor thesis includes the sections up until a methodology. And what I've seen in the previous semester is that some students already have started collecting their data before they handed the intermediate bachelor thesis. And it can happen, so realize that that is reality. It can happen that you will receive the feedback of still working out an element related to your data collection. Or maybe, in worst case, even the feedback that the proposed data collection instrument is not the most effective one looking at the goal of your thesis. So my honest advice will be to hand in your intermediate bachelor thesis and only after the feedback that you receive to start collecting your data, just to avoid such kind of situations. What we try with giving you feedback on the intermediate bachelor thesis is to keep the time frame between handing it in and the written feedback you get really very, very short. Last semester, it worked out that we could react in maximum of 4 days. So I really hope that it will work out this semester too, but I trust it will be the case. So let's see. I don't have any other questions so far, so let's move on. And I'm going to resume sharing my screen with you. All right. Well, the next part of this webinar, I would like to use to go one by one through 6 steps, which I can do by using, for instance, the so-called Big 6 model. It's a model developed by Eisenberg and Berkowitz, specifically related to collecting and processing information. So it is not necessarily a 6 steps model which you can use, as I said at the beginning, only for your literature review, even though it it might seem though in my story, I think it also goes for any kind of information that you are collecting right now, and also later on when you decide on your methodology, when you work out implementations or business models. So once again, it's really applicable to your whole project. And it goes like this. It starts with a clear definition of task, then continues with choosing an information-seeking strategy, which I will later call search strategy, locating your sources, processing the information, restructuring and synthesizing the information, and evaluating what you have done and adjusting the information-seeking strategy if needed. I'm going to take the majority of the time to talk about step 2, so defining your search strategy or information-seeking strategy as defined in this model. Processing the information and restructuring and synthesizing the information. I think those 3 steps are steps which need a bit more elaboration, and as I said, I also have some tools I prepared to share with you. So through the course of these steps, of clarifying the steps, I would like to use an example. And for that purpose, imagine that you're interested in the needs and the wants of millennials, specifically when visiting a restaurant, a hotel, or a festival. And this question is not that hypothetical, because I know of at least 3 people in your cohort who are interested in millennials in general. So what I have in mind is, and if this will be my bachelor thesis, I will say my thesis is about the needs and the wants of millennials, specifically when they visit a restaurant. So what will be then the very first task, very first step in defining your task? Well, sounds a bit childish to say the task is obviously writing your bachelor thesis. That's I believe clear for many of you, for all of you. But what I think it's worth it, it's reminding you what actually a bachelor thesis is. The idea behind the bachelor thesis is that you will produce a research report. So, and any kind of scientific research implies a systematic approach in testing the hypothesis, if you have those later in the process, answering a question or reaching a goal. And this whole idea of systematic approach is not only applicable when you gather and you analyze your data, that speaks really for itself, but it's actually underlying each and every step in your research project already now, when you are still thinking of a specific topic, of a specific question of designing your methodology. So even reading about the topic of interest, and for sure writing about it in coherent and convincing manner, will be only possible if you have created a system for yourself from the very beginning. So you could also say it all boils down to choosing information-seeking strategy, a smart one, which is not only efficient but also effective, and that will enable you to create this systematic approach as one of the underlying principles of scientific research. So that's your task in a nutshell. All right. So the next step will be to choose information-seeking strategy or your search strategy. And I think an essential starting point for all of you is this part offered by our library, which you can find under the general page of the NHTV library, and specifically the so-called research skills. In it, you have a couple of very interesting tabs. Like, for instance, the idea of creating a search strategy, which I'm going to highlight a bit more today as well. What is plagiarism? Some people are still wondering of what plagiarism is. I will tell you and show you also another link on what EndNote is. So there are at least 2 cases on the NHTV library where you can learn more about EndNote, which is a referencing software. And this one about finding books on the shelf. with some instructions and sometimes a PDF, sometimes videos. So if you haven't checked this one yet, I will say that will be for sure something to do later on. But essentially, when you are defining your search strategy, you are asking yourself two questions, or you should ask yourself at least two questions. What and where do I read? And what are the keywords when I search? And for that purpose, I wanted to draw a coggle with you. But looking at my time, I'm going to use the coggle that I have drawn already and brainstorm about the idea of the needs and the wants of millennials. So the first step in defining this search strategy for myself will be to think of what am I reading, where am I reading, and when I define what to read, what are then indeed keywords. Let's have a look. How can something like that look like? Let me go back to, there it is. So I drew this one when I was preparing this webinar. So the central idea is that I'm interested in the needs and the wants of the millennials. And the first part of this coggle that I would like to highlight is this one, the one on the left. So an essential part of any search strategy is to define your search keywords and phrases. And this is something that you can really do on just based on your experience and knowledge so far. You don't need to read a lot on it, but just think and brainstorm. If I'm interested in the needs and the wants of the millennials, what can be the first keywords that I'm going to use when I search for information? Well, I thought millennials characteristics, millennials needs, millennials wants, and not to forget millennials definition. If, for instance, let's open Google Scholar for the purpose. There is my Scholar here. If I will even do this, if I'm not quite sure about what are the keywords, then voila, giving me, I already have the combinations, so phrases with the millennials, which I might or might not find relevant for my project. But looking at it, millennials marketing might be a good one to start with. Millennials generation, I took millennials characteristics from here and defined those as the keywords that I'm going to use. At the same time, it's also smart, wise to define related words and phrases. What if those keywords don't give you the hits that you're really hoping for, then you should extend your search strategy by, for instance, searching for millennials as clients, as buyers, as guests. It depends obviously on the perspective that you're adopting, but at this phase, imagine that I'm at the beginning of designing this project. I want to keep my options open, so that's why I have at least 3 related words and phrases. What's also relevant in some situations is to think of alternative spellings. In the case of millennials, that doesn't really apply, but imagine that your project is about organizational culture. Organizational can be written with an S and a Z, depending on the US or UK spelling. And if you will only follow one type of spelling, that will really limit the hits that you are getting. So already at this phase, you can think of alternative spellings. And the same goes for synonyms and acronyms. Sometimes I hear graduates saying, I cannot find anything related to my topic. And to be perfectly honest, I find it impossible. Considering the access to different databases that we have, that just cannot be the case. So in the process of defining your keywords and phrases, think of possible synonyms, their online dictionary of synonyms, or acronyms which you can use during your search. So that's one important part of your search strategy. And the other important part, as I said, is where am I reading and what am I reading? It goes without saying that Google Scholar is a search engine that it can save you lots of time. So I will definitely have it in my search strategy. Also, the university library and the catalogs with all the books. Why isn't it opening now for me? Should be able to open immediately. Maybe this is the thing. No. So, come on, please open it. Okay, let me do it like this. Oh, that's it. I had to click on top. So, our own library and the books on the shelf are definitely a place to search for textbooks, and the ones that you need in the field. It goes without saying that some academic journals will need to be on your search strategy. And I was thinking, if it's about needs and wants, my gut feeling is telling me that this is probably a topic which will fit the domain of marketing, so the knowledge domain of marketing. That's why I came up with the idea of the International Marketing Review, the European Journal of Marketing, the International Journal of Research Marketing. It's hidden behind my my video. The Journal of Consumer Culture, probably, and I can make or extend the list even with more marketing-related journals. So you might also ask yourself, but how do I know which to select, and how do I know even to which do we have access? So we actually have a list with journals. It's still happening with me. There it is. So one way to define which are the top journals within a knowledge domain is to use the idea of journal rankings. Maybe you've heard about those rankings, about those impact factors. And our library, again, offers you a very handy tool to find out which journals are the most cited, which probably will also mean that they have the highest impact factor in a specific knowledge domain. And I found in particular, so there are 3 ways to do this. I found in particular the Google Scholar Matrix way, a very quick way to find out which are the top ones. So let me show you. If you open this one, and then applying a couple of filters like this, the Business and Economics and Management filter seems rather logical for me, considering the type of the programs you're following. And then the subcategories, and I have a couple of options in here, but I immediately see marketing. So voila, clicking on it, I get 20 journals related to that knowledge field, and including their ranking. So I can already say in my search strategy, first I'm going to focus on papers published in those on the first top 5 journals. So that's one way to choose which academic journals you want to focus on. Another way is to talk to experts. Talk to experts in which journals you must read. Experts working for the NHTV, but also outside. And that will also help you to identify the key authors. I'm not really a marketing specialist, but for instance, from what I've been reading so far is every time that you read about change, for instance, organizational change, you know that Shine will be a key author. That pops up in almost every textbook and in also in lots of papers. So in this process of finding out what to read and whom to read, then the ranking and impact factors can be for sure a starting point, but also talking to experts. There's one way also, a quick way to find out who are the experts at the NHTV. I'm always doing this. There it is. No. Let's go to the database. Okay, this link is not working for me. Interesting. Maybe because there is a bracket. But this is, at the library of the NHTV actually offers the NHTV knowledge database. So that's the URL that you see now on my screen. And within the NHTV knowledge database, you virtually have everybody working for the NHTV, but then organized for expertise, for knowledge expertise. And you can specifically zoom into our academy. So if you didn't know by now who is the expert here within the academy, that's one way to find out. or ask your graduation coach for that matter as well. But in here you have lots of details. And what's also very interesting on this knowledge base is that you can also find a list with all the publication of lecturers and researchers employed by the NHTV. Some of those papers might be really worth pursuing. To wrap up the idea of the search strategy, I was thinking if it's about the needs and the wants of millennials, then I would really like to know also what's the public opinion about millennials. And to me, at this point at least, I'm at the beginning of setting up my project, this feels like a very topical issue. What millennials want and how that relates to their restaurant visits or hotel bookings for that matter. And LexisNexis is a very valuable database that we all have access to. That's a database with all newspapers, not only within the Netherlands, in many different languages. And those newspapers will give you an idea of the public opinion on a specific topic. Already now, you can also decide in this phase which databases I would like to work with. I mentioned here 3, which are the 3 most commonly used within our field, I will say. Science Direct, EBSCO, and Emerald. But as you know by now, there are many more, and the overview with the databases, again, is available via the library. There it is. So by choosing hotel and facility, then you will have the list with all available databases, including LexisNexis, the one I just mentioned, or Eurostat, which is the Statistical Office of the European Union. Lots of data and related and comparisons between countries in Europe. For some of you, that might be very relevant, and so on and so forth. I believe by now we know where to find databases, but it's worth at this phase deciding if specifically want to focus on some. And last but not least, I think nowadays you can also not escape from using online channels and thinking on research methods and techniques, not necessarily related to this topic, but in general. I was thinking of the NHTV LibGuide on design research. I will show you the LibGuide in a minute. But also on the YouTube channels that University of Amsterdam has on methods, research methods, and whatever kind of online channel that you think it's relevant to pursue. TED Talks might be an interesting one, especially when it comes to millennials. So this is roughly a first sketch of my search strategy if I'm going to pursue this project. Oh, let's go back to my slides. And the next step after drawing that strategy will be to locate your sources, which actually means that you will pursue searching for information with the keywords and phrases that you have defined in all those sources that you planned, the databases, the academic journals, textbooks, what have you. And I think it's also useful to check out the knowledge clips related specifically to searching in databases by using the library. I'm not going to do that now in this limited time I have. By using the library guides, we very often call them LibGuides as well. And I'm sure that some of you maybe never seen the LibGuides so far. So it's when you go to the library, you will see on your left side library guides, and in here you have general library guides, like on design research, the one I mentioned, the one on referencing I will use in a minute. But now specifically I wanted to show you the library knowledge clips, because I think it's a very valuable source of handy tutorials for you. Like for instance, how do you search for papers in a specific databases? What about the meta search? What about LexisNexis tutorial in here? What about Statista, another database of statistics with industry reports and different studies, very new by the way, added to our collection. What about this one, a very specific one on hospitality and tourism? I think it will save you lots of time and frustration when you work with the databases. If you check out some of those tutorials, especially the meta search, for instance, it will help you to see how you can filter your searches and quickly get into the papers that you really need. Same goes for books, for the journal articles, and specifically for statistics. This one will go, it's about using LexisNexis, specific company information reports if you're looking for, and so on and so forth. So this as well is an essential source of handy tutorials for you. But then what? So locating your sources is one thing, and following step by step the strategy that you had in mind. But the next step will be to organize the outcome. And how do you do it? Well, I came up with two possibilities. The first one is to extend the mind map. So the cobble that I just used, if we go to it again, what you can do, for instance, is take the International Marketing Review as an example. The moment you have a hit with the International Marketing Review, you can extend here the cobble by saying 3 hits and adding the titles of the papers. That's one possibility. I've seen it in one of my sources as an example to record the outcome of your search activities. And I'm going to share with you also another way, which is another way to visualize such kind of hits by creating an Excel sheet. This is something that I've been using at the beginning of my own research. And for the purpose, I actually used a template which was available with the NHTV library a while ago. I seem not to be able to find the template anymore, but a couple of years ago it was there, so I modified it a little bit. So see what I have done. I've created a very simple Excel sheet, and in fact it's also my research log, because in here, based on a topic of interest or research question, I'm noting down the keywords I'm using for my search actions or the search terms. In this example that you're looking at, I've been searching for a combination of 3, so 2 words and a phrase: performance feedback, performance, and grief, which is a key author in my field of interest. And I've been noting down what I found in which database or index, like a meta search, I've been searching, what are indeed the combinations of words that I've been using, and what is that I found out. And often I've created, which the search within the databases creates for you, I've created lists with sources and simply saved them as a PDF and linked them to my grid. Like this one, I think it's a long one with the outcome of this search activity with abstracts per paper and so on and so forth, even with a link to that paper. So let's go back to my Excel file. Very valuable for me was when I was searching for methods. So sticking to the example of the needs and the wants of millennials, somewhere halfway preparing my working on my intermediate bachelor thesis, I will have to ask myself, how did others find out what the needs and the wants of millennials are? So what specifically, which specifically research instruments did they use? A questionnaire, an interview, what was asked then, on which topics or which exact questions were asked. So the same way of searching for information I applied also when I was interested in the methodology related to my my project, and again creating and keeping track of the same log. So, for instance, content analysis is one type of analysis of written text, and you see, for instance, in one specific database, organization research methods, SAGE, I have like 284 hits, but only 5 papers are papers that I have chosen. I think there was one underneath here which was worth showing to you, like this one, registering what I found on sequential mixed methods, and once again creating a list of all the articles which I kept. There it is, 14 pages with lots of papers. So going back to my webinar, I think I learned along the way that this maybe seems at first glance as a lot of work, but I believe it's not, because it's just one simple table that you create and a copy paste of PDF files which you save. But it saved me a lot of time not to repeat my search actions. I hope you, some of you already experienced this. If you do not keep track of the search terms and the database that you use those search terms and the hits that you get, at a certain moment you will keep on repeating the same search action without any record of the hits that you are getting. And those PDFs also help me to identify which are the papers that I really want to pursue, meaning which are the papers that I really want to read, which actually leads us to the next step, which is the step of processing the information. And when processing the information and deciding which of all those, let's say, papers, books, online materials that I found are worth pursuing, then you will have to judge on the credibility of the sources in general, but also on the credibility of that particular paper first, before you also judge on the relevance of the content of that source. So the first thing to consider is, how do you judge on the credibility of the sources in general? Well, in general, there are like 3 main ideas that you can use to justify the credibility, to justify the choice of a source. And the first one I mentioned already, that's the impact factor of a journal. Can be a criteria that you use. Another one commonly used in academia is the perception of senior researchers and experts within the NHTV or outside, which is that one paper that you have to read, which are the key authors that you really have to know about, and then ask them for advice, and that helps you actually already say that it's a credible source. Also websites which are established by experts in the field. At a certain point, you will hear the same names of experts, and many of them have established websites with information. Think of Mr. Rubens here at the NHTV and his Organized with Chaos website. That's, I think, a good example of a credible source. And if you zoom into a particular paper, you can ask yourself those 5 questions in order to simply quickly decide, this is indeed a paper I would like to read on further. Does the author refer to other writers, journal articles, and sources of the information in discussion? Does it have a comprehensive list of references? It goes without saying, but sometimes there are no such lists. Does it addresses the question raised in the study at the very beginning? Is there up-to-date information used? And this is an interesting one, but for the sake of time, we cannot talk a lot about it. In some cases, up-to-date information means information from the past 5 years, if it's about a very, very novel development or a novel problem. And sometimes up-to-date information means that you will have to go 20 years back in time if, for instance, your study is somehow related to the definition of hospitality. Just to give you an idea that up-to-date, it doesn't mean published this year. And last but not least, does it put forward recent arguments? So is there evidence in the papers offered? Very often it meant empirical evidence, so evidence collected by the authors to justify the arguments that they're making. So this is like a quick checklist to help you identify the credibility of the sources. And I'm moving slowly to also deciding on how to decide on based on the content of the papers which one you want to read. And a short intermezzo is asking the question, but why would you have to read anyway? And I think it's really worth realizing that there's a very, very clear connection between your reading and your writing skills. The very simple explanation is the fact that you're going to build a vocabulary. The more you read, the better you will be in putting on paper your ideas, so expressing yourself on paper, but also face-to-face. If I'm going to read 10 articles related to marketing and related to the needs and wants of millennials, obviously after 10 papers I will start speaking the language of those professionals and of those experts, and at the end, one of the goals with the thesis as well is that you develop into a expert in a particular field. So reading for sure will help you build that vocabulary, and not only related to marketing in my example, but also related to methodology. And I also think that it's the magic word, the magic verb, whenever you get into the state of being stuck and not moving forward with your project, based on experience, I can say a way to get out of it is to read a little bit more, because that will give you again new and fresh ideas, so you can continue with thinking out why it's important to investigate a topic, or to use a specific methodology, just to name two simple examples. And what I also learned in my research experience so far is that especially this initial phase of your project, what is important is to find the so-called good leads. And I hope you agree with me, very often when you read papers, you see that authors of the papers cite another one by saying it's a seminal work or a seminal paper of ... When we talk about strategy, we talk about Porter and Mintzberg, right? To put things black and white, but those will be the two, the first names which will pop up. So any paper which uses strategic management as one of their theoretical bases will probably cite seminal works of Porter and or Mintzberg. Those are your magic words. The moment you find that, you really need to go to the original articles and read those articles from A to Z. Find out, for instance, by using the citation number in Google Scholar or in Web of Science. Google Scholar works really very quickly, and finding out how many people, how many authors afterwards have been citing that particular paper. Very often you see numbers about hundreds, and you realize why those papers are called seminal work. But those are ones that you would have to know all about. All the others, I will say, in order to read effectively, you could skim. And what does it mean? It took me a while to train myself to read a lot of papers. At the beginning, I needed like a day for one paper, and maybe some of you will relate to this feeling, which is very frustrating, because at the end of the day, you have read only one, and you don't have really the feeling that you're moving forward. So by talking to many people involved in research, I kind of learned and trained myself to skip papers before I decide, okay, this 5 papers out of the 180 hits that I got are definitely papers I'm going to pursue. 2 golden rules: read the abstract for sure, because in the abstract, that research project in the paper will be explained from the beginning to the end. So what was the research question and what were the findings? And read the first sentences of each paragraph. Ideally, those sentences are also the topic sentences, and that quickly gives you an idea if, so that's only the first sentences of each paragraph. That quickly gives you an idea if that particular paper is really worth pursuing further, and it will help you to define or to decide which part of the paper to read, if you decide to read parts or the whole paper. So skimming can save you really a lot of time and help you work faster through sometimes hundreds of papers that you find after a search action. And just before you start actually writing out those sources that you are absolutely convinced they're worth adding into your bachelor thesis, I need to say something about referencing. Processing also means referencing. A good researcher has developed good habits related to referencing, which is actually very simple, and that is the moment you decide that a chapter of a book, a report online, a website, a paper is worth using, you have to create it as a reference for yourself. And again, I'm going to the NHTV LibGuide, but this one, specifically the one on referencing. And I saw one or two questions popping up while I was talking about this. Let me see, there it is, referencing. There was already a question about referencing software. And I think the NHTV library guide offers you some very, very handy information about referencing, including referencing software. Not to mention what referencing is, but I'm going to skip that one. First, for instance, looking at the referencing styles. I know some of you are still doubting, but actually it is very clearly stated in here, and that is definitely a policy that we are following, that within the NHTV you are allowed to use either APA or Harvard, with the only golden rule is that with whatever you choose between those two styles, that you're consistent in citing your sources following the APA guidelines or Harvard guidelines. And what is, I hope, a very handy point of departure for some of you is to see this one. So what our colleagues from the library have done is explaining the four most used software programs so far. The first one, the possibilities that you have in Word to keep track of your references. Another one is Mendeley. A third one is Zotero. I saw a question already about that one. And the fourth one is EndNote. I have to admit that which software program you use, it's a very personal decision, and it's really based on with which one you feel comfortable with. I used Word up until my master thesis personally. I found it extremely simple and really a time saver as well to manage my sources in Word. Only one time that I had to add in the information per source, and then I could cite them and create my bibliography list quite easily. At this point, I'm using Zotero. At the beginning, it took me a while, so I had to invest some time in really understanding how especially the add-ons of Zotero work. And I don't have any experience with Mendeley and EndNote. I went, though, to an instruction of EndNote, and I personally found it a lot of hustle, a lot of clicking, and not really user-friendly, but that's my personal opinion. I think there are lots of students and lecturers, researchers within the NHTV and outside using EndNote. So it's really worth checking those four options out and choosing one. I'm more than happy to help people who decide to use Zotero. I remember at the beginning I had a colleague here who has been using it already for a couple of years, so he helped me a lot, and now I don't even need his help anymore because I can solve any technical problem if I encounter one. But I do honestly think that one of the easiest way for you will be to manage your sources by using what Microsoft Word is offering you. And it doesn't matter if you have an Apple computer or a Windows-based computer, those possibilities are available. And what you can find in this LibGuide, I believe it was this link, it's a, no, it's not that one. Let's go back. see, now I have so many. Which one was it? Oh my, oh my. Now I have so many open. Now this is the instruction for Microsoft Office, but the other one, okay, obviously I will need to close some to be able to find quickly what I wanted. Somehow it closed the other one for me, but perfectly fine because I can still find it in here. Guide on referencing and referencing software. I'm sorry for this wrong click. What is done here that it's you quickly redirected to a very handy playlist on how to use this referencing tool in Word. Quick explanation how to swap between different sources. So my advice will be that this is really a time saver if you decide to follow that idea. All right. So enough about referencing. We're almost at the end of the steps and almost at the end of the time that we have. But one of the last and essential steps in the process after you decide which sources are really worth adding into your reference list is to restructure and synthesize the information. And this is probably not new at all, but it's worth reminding you of the so-called graphic organizers that you have at your disposal. Sometimes they are called graphic matrix or literature matrix or search matrix or simply a grid. And all credit go to Ms. Hondeling. She's been creating those grids and sharing with many of you, I believe, also with me. So how do those look? This one is a simple word table with some very relevant questions that you can use when you read an article. For instance, obviously you'll start with the name of the article and the author. So the title of the article and the name of the author, I mean, who are they, name and date of publication, but what's the most important for now is what is the main argument, what is the research methodology that they have been using, what are their findings. Those are suggestions of the most important questions that you can ask, and you will be able to modify, for instance, some of those cells quickly. I'm personally a fan of the other one, that's this one. I also use it currently in my own research, and I kind of modified and extended it quite a lot. Again, a table in Word, and rather similar headings in here. So the title and the source, a brief explanation of the context, the aim and the research questions per paper, the methodology, the key findings, and some comments and critiques. You can, for instance, add additional columns which might be relevant, like, for instance, you can really disentangle the methodology and write out if they've been using a quantitative research or qualitative, what type of measurement instruments have been used, how many participants have been used, where exactly, so geographical location of the study. For some of you that might be very, very, very relevant. And I think this is a very systematic way of processing the papers or the sources, not only papers, but sources that you want to use in your thesis, which will enable you when you start working on your literature review to get into the phase of synthesizing and criticizing those authors. So that is the literature grid example as created by Ms. Hondeling. I found another way of dealing with this issue provided by Professor Taylor. He's a professor in writing in English language, I believe. Don't pin me on the exact title, but in the US he lives and works in Georgia, and you can check out his link in a profile later. What I also already shared with you, at least with the people who follow the bachelor thesis course, but you will be able to find this as well if you're not part of the course, the so-called 30-minute step-by-step guide, in which he actually shows an alternative way to summarize first and then synthesize what you have found. And he also has a YouTube channel, I also believe worth following. He calls himself Peak David over there. So obviously he's called David Taylor, which might be also a very handy channel to look at when you decide on your methodologies, but especially when you work on your reading and writing. And I want quickly to show you something on this 30-minute step-by-step guide that he has. But I'll have to get out of this and open the course in Scalable. So for the people who are part of the course, under the literature review model, you will be able to find this link, 5 easy steps. And what is interesting to see is how basically he starts with, it's simply summarizing papers. So he's saying, just start first summarizing one by one the papers that you read. And by summarizing them first, reordering afterwards, searching for overarching themes related to arguments, related to solutions, related to definitions, that already help you to shape paragraphs which you can either use for your introduction, for your literature review, for your methodology. I think literally for every part of your thesis in which you are planning to use sources, this might be a quick way to deal with what you're reading. So going back again to our story here. All right. So Professor David Taylor it is. And then I think this is my last slide. Then what? How can you organize your writing? Well, I can talk about writing for a very long time, but I wouldn't. I do think that good habit in terms of writing will mean writing. I recently found out 20 minutes without any distractions, then having a short break, and then writing again for 20 minutes. But something that you also have at your disposal, if I'm correct, are the so-called standard phases for academic writing. Again, all credit goes to Ms. Vonderling, which I believe for many of you can be very, very handy, especially if you're looking for bridges between paragraphs, or you're not quite sure how, for instance, to introduce what those standard views, how to introduce something applied or assumed. So this is quite long, so it's 8 pages long overview of those standard phases helps you to create flow in your writing. And I must admit that I find it rather long. So what I've done, for instance, myself, is I took a couple of those standard phrases, maybe modified them a tiny bit here and there, put them on a very simple 1A4, which I place next to my computer when I start writing. And actually by now, some of them I just use without even thinking. So, and it really makes your writing much more powerful and much more clear. And they're there, so you can use them. Probably you'll be able to find them in your English course in year 3 on NetSchool. But as I promised, I'm going to share with you everything after the webinar, everything I've showed you. So going back to my PowerPoint. And this inevitably will help you to already now start creating your thesis outline, meaning the titles of your chapters, the titles of your sub-chapters already. As one of the last elements within that literature grid that I showed you here, which for instance I'm doing right now, is the moment you start creating this outline for your thesis is to add per paper for which part of your thesis you want to use it. And you can do it in such an overview, or you can simply color the paper if you print it to create a system for yourself of knowing, okay, these are the sources which I'm going to use for the introduction. These are the sources which I'm only going to use for the literature review. These will be dedicated to the methodological part. As one of the bigger mistakes that you can make is to rely on one source, and that is really not done in academic writing. So already now when you search and you record and you process those sources, you can think of possible applications per part of your thesis, and if not, that will be something that you can add later on for yourself, and that will again make also your writing much more effective. I'm out of time, so thank God I'm at my last slide already. So in sum, creating a system to guide your search actions will really assist you in organize your reading and writing. And I hope I offered just some possibilities to create such a system. It's not said that this is the only way to do so, but some, like the grid, for instance, have been tested and used by a lot of professionals. But whatever system that you come up with yourself, it will help you to spot the lead papers, the seminal papers, and it will help you to develop into an expert yourself. A very important one is it will help you to deal with referencing as expected, so as following the APA or Harvard guidelines. While actually I think that's one of the most important ones for now, will save you also a lot of time. And last but not least, it will help you to create a storyline in your thesis. And a hint already about the next webinar, before I move into the questions that you have, is to see how what we discuss right now will be very helpful when we talk about the topics of organizing a literature review during the next seminar. Because during that seminar, I'm going to introduce you 3 ways of doing that: a chronological, thematical, and methodological ways, which will be which will come after taking some time of talking about theory and how you can find one for your thesis. So let's thank you for your attention, and let's see if you already have, you definitely have, because I saw some popping in, if there are questions that I can ask, I can answer. Let's see. I'm going to go now through your questions. I'm already 7 minutes over time. I was thinking that probably I have too much I have in mind for this hour and 15 minutes. Let me see. Okay. A question from Caroline about the endnote. Many flaws, maybe it would be better to use Zotero. Yeah, I hope I clarified this one. That's also my personal experience. I prefer very much Zotero, but I do think that that's maybe for some of you really an extra mile, and it will take you some time to learn to deal with the referencing software. So maybe Word is even a better option, but it's something that you need to try out yourself, and then you will find out quickly if Zotero or Word works out the best for you. So Rob is asking, indeed, would you recommend Zotero? Yeah, I personally find it really a time savior. I can show you, if you want, how my Zotero library looks like in a second. This is, for instance, my, I have to share the screen, obviously, with you. Share my screen. Yes, resume. So this is how my Zotero library looks like. I've been organizing everything I'm reading per topic. So, for instance, education and quality. A paper I have been writing, specifically bundled all my sources over there. This is very much related to my current research, so hospitality performance, institutions, and it's so easy to find the papers that I need. Even if I don't know where I put them in one of the subfolders, I can quickly search here, for instance, for all the papers of one of my key authors, and they will pop up on my screen. So I have personally good experience with Zotero. Let's say there are more questions. Jeroen Redenburg is asking about a tool to help me out. I think you mean the coggle that I've been drawing when creating the search strategy. Yeah, it helps you out. Would you put something like that in the report itself? There's no requirement necessarily to justify your search strategy, but I think if you can create a nice PDF out of it and add it into your report, and especially when you explain in your methodology how you have selected your sources, that might be of a value. But without referencing in your main text to an attachment like this, then indeed it's only a tool that you create for yourself in order to get into this systematic search, but not necessarily something that you will put in the bachelor thesis eventually. Yeah, Malu is asking if I'm going to save the presentation with the links. Definitely. I'm going to place all the documents most probably in Google Drive and share the links with you because you're not going to access them via my presentation, but I will make them available after I convert also this video. Again, Jeroen is asking the form about to sum up the articles. Is it something to include in your report? Well, or in the appendix? Well, eventually it will end up in your literature review, but then in another shape. So if you will create such a Word file for yourself right now, you will use it to write your literature review and make a coherent story out of it. So most probably you will even copy paste some of the parts that you have in this Word file. So would you put it as an attachment? I wouldn't do that. I don't think it adds any value. Okay. Well, I don't see any other questions. So I suppose there are no questions. And as I said, this is a very, very practical one. Next one will be more on the content of the literature review. And well, I hope to see you there next week again. Thank you. And I'm very sorry for the almost 15 minutes extra. I'll do my best next week to really fit into the hour and 15 minutes. Bye-bye.